Then Kevin, with an innocent look on his face, said something horrifying. Exchange. Well, your mother-in-law is going to pass away soon, right? We're getting the inheritance, so why do we need to work? At those words, I was beyond angry. I was simply flabbergasted. And then Kevin continued speaking. I visited her the other day to get some pocket money. She looked really bad. I think she doesn't have much time left. He said this with a grin that suggested he might start humming a tune. And to put it mildly, I thought he was a devil disguised as an angel. Kevin had turned greedy and sold the violin my mother cherished. I was already disappointed in Kevin, but now I felt utterly devastated. If you want to be spoiled by a woman, go ahead. If there's someone who'd indulge you, then leech off them for as long as you want. But I won't ever indulge you again. He who can only repay kindness with spite should get a glimpse of hell. I will never forgive you. I'm Catherine Thompson, a 37-year-old housewife. Last year, I married Kevin and we lived together without any children. I met Kevin at work. Once, Kevin joined the company I worked for as a temporary staff member. With his elusive attitude, making it unclear if he had any motivation or not, seemed to frustrate the trainers of the new employee orientation. Eventually, the trainers handed him off to me for guidance. Attacked me. When I asked him why he wasn't taking the training seriously, Kevin said, well, the trainers were men, and old ones at that. If someone like you was in charge from the start, I would have worked harder. Somehow Kevin's smile made my heart waver a bit. Even though he was approaching his 30s, Kevin had this charm that evoked a protective or maternal instinct. Back then, not just me, but most senior female bosses adored him. Because I was always guiding Kevin, seeing him get along with other female bosses made me feel a tinge of jealousy. Reading my feelings, Kevin once said, I only want to be taught by you, Catherine, and gave me that carefree smile of his. That's when I started to understand why some women get hooked on those charming ladies' men. Just around that time, my mother Alice fell ill. She always had chronic health issues, but recently she got so bad she couldn't get up. She decided not to be hospitalized and received care at home. Kevin and I worked for one of the companies managed by my mother. If something were to happen to my mother, I'd have a mountain of things to consider, including the management of the family business and financial matters. I decided to take a leave of absence from work, especially with the wish of caring for my mother. Just when I thought I wouldn't see Kevin anymore, he asked me out. He said, Catherine, I want to be with you from now on. And so we started dating. After dating for some time and considering marriage, I introduced Kevin to my mother. At that time, my mom, who had been looking pale due to her illness, seemed to brighten up and feel better as she talked with Kevin. I thought to myself, it's Kevin, always charming older women. Still, I was happy to see my mother and Kevin get along so well. Later on, Kevin agreed to my strong wish to keep my family's surname Thompson. So we decided to tie the knot. Kevin has always had a knack for being pampered. Even when we were dating, I paid for all our dates. That hasn't changed since we got married. Even a year into our marriage, Kevin never reaches for his wallet. Every time the bill comes, he always steps back a bit and looks at me with those puppy dog eyes. And with those eyes, he seems to silently plead, "Could you please pay?" Seeing him like that, I can't help but feel, oh well. And I always end up paying. Admittedly, I earn more than Kevin, who's currently a temp worker. Even after our monthly expenses, thanks to my savings, we live comfortably. When I asked Kevin if it hurt his pride as a man that I always paid, he replied nonchalantly, "What pride? It's common these days for women to be the breadwinners, ain't it?" Even as a temp worker, if Kevin put in a bit more effort, he could secure a full-time position. Up until I took my leave, I felt like I'd given him enough guidance. Not only about work, but also about business etiquette and the mindset needed for his job. I also wanted Kevin to understand the responsibilities that came with marriage. However, against all my expectations, Kevin quit his job all too easily. Just when I pressed him for a reason, Kevin, with a seemingly innocent face, asserted his shocking statement, "Why work? Your mom's gonna pass away soon, right? We'll inherit her assets, so why bother?" I was flabbergasted and couldn't even muster anger at his words. Then Kevin continued, "You know, I went to see her the other day to get some allowance, but she looked pretty bad. I think she won't last much longer. Can't wait for the inheritance. It's gonna be exciting." Saying that, he began fiddling with his smartphone, a smirk on his face as if he might start humming any second. That was the moment I realized that Kevin, to put it mildly, was a devil in an angel's disguise. I was at my mother's house again today by the afternoon. By the afternoon, my sister Mary had returned to our mother's house. Cousin Mary had married young, and her kids are already in college, living on their own out of state. Her husband Bob is on a business assignment abroad, so Mary has been staying at our mother's house lately. I take care of our mother in the mornings while Mary is at work. Speaking of which, Kevin came by the other day. He said he was there to pay a visit, but he just sweet-talked Mom into giving him some money and left. Isn't he working yet? Again. It seems Kevin has been visiting my mother several times when I'm not around. And getting money from my mother has become a pattern. Before we got married, when I brought Kevin to meet my mom, he seemed to accidentally notice that she had a vast fortune. That's probably why he quit his job, banking on the inheritance, and keeps coming for handouts. What a leech! Indeed, the mansion where my mother lives is on the most elevated piece of land around here, and the entrance is quite impressive. This house was built by our late father, who was also quite wealthy. When he passed away, my mother took over all of his businesses and expanded the wealth even further. Now, just from her businesses alone, she has assets worth $13 million. There's a violin showcased in my mother's room. It seems to be a keepsake from our father, who once aspired to be a musician. But no matter how wealthy she became, our mother often said there's nothing more precious than that violin. It was so Kevin to have the sharp instincts to notice the value of that violin. Mary, next time Kevin comes over, you don't have to give him any money. But Mom keeps giving it to him. It's really frustrating. I felt defeated again. At Fascinating for Sian, though I've only been married to Kevin for just over a year, I need to consider our future together. Seeing me downcast, Mary reached out.
There are men who live off women with money, you know?
Kevin probably lived like that too.
Don't worry, if you decide to divorce, I'm on your side.
Mary's words were a great comfort. Perhaps Kevin will change in the future. Divorce was always an option, so I decided I would think about it if and when necessary. One day, my mother's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. After eating a little breakfast, she went to sleep but suddenly began to struggle. Luckily, both my sister and I were at Mom's house that morning, so we noticed right away. Mom fell into a coma. The doctor who arrived told us to prepare for the worst, and both Mary and I struggled to keep our composure. Somehow Mom held on till the next day. During that time, Mary's kids and Bob, who came from abroad, visited. Yet, despite having taken so much allowance from her, Kevin was nowhere to be seen. It might be the last chance to see my mother. That night, surrounded by her family, my mother passed away. I believe her last moments were peaceful. Bob and the kids were crying with sorrow. I was heartbroken too. Since the doctor had told us to be prepared, Mary and I could swiftly move on to the next steps. Planning the funeral, notifying various people. Thanks to our prior preparations, things proceeded relatively smoothly. I sent Kevin a message, telling him about Mom's passing and the details of the funeral. It was obvious from the check mark on the message that he read it, but he didn't reply. Perhaps he's in shock, I thought, and waited for him to show up at the funeral. At the funeral, Mary and I greeted the people who had close friendships with Mom during her lifetime. Executives from her company, longtime friends, so many gathered for her. Knowing how much she was loved by everyone, my heart swelled with emotions. Then Bob approached us looking very distressed. I went to bring the violin Mom cherished to place it at the venue, but it's gone.
Kristen, I went to bring the violin Mom cherished to place it at the venue, but it's gone.
What?
As we've been so busy from the time Mom passed until the funeral and had left Mom's house unattended.
Could it have been robbed during that time? Mary looked surprised too. I remembered what Mary had told me the other day. She said that Kevin was watching the violin intently. I quickly called Kevin, who hadn't yet appeared at the funeral. Well, to my surprise, he answered after only 2 rings. Hey Kevin, what are you up to? Are you coming to the funeral? Where are you?
You're bombarding me with questions. That's kind of funny.
Your mother passed away, right? It took longer than I thought. I've been waiting and I'm kinda tired. I wanted to yell at Kevin for his insensitive remark, but I held back, urging him to come to the funeral right away.
I'm kinda in the middle of something right now. No.
But you know the violin in your mom's room? The one called the Barius or something?
There's a collector who wants to buy that old thing, and I'm in the middle of selling it.
Kevin was selling my mother's violin. Kevin, stop that process right now. Do you want trouble? I desperately tried to stop him. That violin is something that should never be sold. Oh, can do. The buyer is really eager, and they've got the cash ready. Well, gotta go. Well, got to go. Good luck with the funeral. See ya? Kevin hung up the phone. I couldn't share this about Kevin with everyone at the funeral. I decided to discuss it with Mary and Bob later on. Driven by greed, Kevin had sold the violin my mother cherished. I was already disappointed in Kevin, but now I felt utterly devastated. If you want to lean on a woman, go ahead. If you have someone who'll let you, then keep doing it and live off them. But I'm never going to pamper you again. Each who can only repay kindness with malice should go through hell. I will never forgive you, I screamed in my heart. After the viewing and the burial, Mary, Bob, and I took a brief rest at my mother's house. Just because the funeral was over didn't mean everything was settled. My mother had a broad range of businesses, so there were a lot of things to sort out. But before that, I had to settle things with Kevin. In the end, Kevin didn't show up for the entire funeral, including the viewing or even the burial. Considering how much he had leaned on my mother, I've totally given up on him because he didn't even say a last goodbye. What finally made me so was that Kevin had sold that violin. I hadn't yet told Mary and Bob about it. Anyway, I wonder where Mom's violin ended up. Depending on the situation, we might need to consult with the police. Mary, unaware of everything, looked concerned, resting her chin on her hand. Well, we might have to get the police involved. Catherine, I called someone who knows about the violin, so it'd be good to hear from them directly. Oh, look, here they come. As I said that, a loud engine noise could be heard from a distance. The sound of the engine stopped right in front of our house. As soon after, the sound of a car door slamming shut was heard. And just as I thought that, without even ringing the doorbell, Kevin burst into the house. Hey, Catherine, sorry I missed the funeral. Did a lot of sympathy money come in? Is he really being this insensitive? Mary and Bob clearly looked displeased. Kevin, why didn't you show up at the viewing or the burial? After all the things Mom did for you, aren't you sad about her passing? I tried to keep my anger in check as I confronted Kevin a bit. Kevin replied sarcastically, well, I'm sad, you know. I won't get any more allowance, right? When I use Mom's money for the slot machines, I win quite often. Guess folks who are good with money have luck as well. And without waiting for me to bring it up, he started talking about the violin himself. Turns out, you can't get an inheritance right away. I couldn't wait for all the legal procedures, so I asked an acquaintance to sell the violin at Mom's place. At Kevin's words, Mary's eyes widened in shock. Wait, that you sold it? The violin? Bob, sitting next to her, looked just as stunned. Yeah, and I sold it for $170,000, so I went ahead and bought a car. Hearing this, Mary burst out laughing, her face turning bright red. Touched to pain of a moment later, Bob also broke into loud laughter. Only Kevin looked baffled. Did you really sell it for $170,000? Mary couldn't stop her laughter. Kevin looked at me with a scowl as if saying, "What do you mean?" All I could say was, "I'm sorry for your loss." Now, Kevin's face turned beet red with anger. It was a rare expression for Kevin, who normally never got angry. I began to feel amused. But 10% fat loud card just pulled up yours. I teased Kevin, asking him.
Kevin, trying to keep a straight face, began to brag about his car, which he claimed to have bought for $170,000.
Esther. Oh yeah. You know this house is right on top of a steep hill, right? Felt like used to be tough getting up here, but that car has some serious horsepower. So hills like this are no issue at all. Kevin sounded so smug, it was comical. Watching him, Mary, who'd been laughing her head off, chimed in. Make. Kevin, you made a mistake. You shouldn't have sold that violin. It might even be illegal. That violin is a replica, Kevin said, looking bewildered. Even if it's a replica, it's crafted so well that an amateur might not tell the difference, Mary continued. However, for someone who loves violins enough to collect them, they'd spot the difference in an instant. My dad wanted to be a musician when he was young, but of course, he didn't have much back then. He couldn't afford a real violin. He always admired that one day he got a replica that looked just like the real thing. Still, my dad cherished that violin. He even played it when he proposed to my mom. She was so happy with it, even after my dad passed away. She took good care of that violin. Listening to Mary, Kevin's expression grew tense. I wondered how and to whom he had sold it. He probably chose a shady dealer. I had a certificate with it, Kevin said. When I said it was owned by a wealthy person and came with a certificate. Someone wanted to buy it immediately. Both Mary and I sighed. His thinking was just too naive. I said, Kevin, you should have checked it carefully. That wasn't a certificate. It was a love letter from my dad to my mom, mimicking a certificate. He probably gave it to Mom when he proposed. When he proposed, I wondered how the buyer would react when they saw it. It's gonna be interesting, I said. Kevin's face turned pale. Honestly, I couldn't feel sorry for Kevin at all. Even if it was a replica, he had no right to sell Mom's cherished possession. I was not about to let him off the hook. At that moment, Kevin's cell phone rang. Hello. As he said it, I could hear the furious shouting from the other end of the line. Hey Kevin, what did you do? The buyers lodged a complaint. They said it was clearly a fake. They could tell at a glance. They're demanding $170,000 back now. They said they're going to report you to the police if you don't pay. Just as I had thought, the person on the phone was probably the broker who had facilitated the sale. It's questionable that the broker didn't verify the item properly, and the buyer, for wanting to buy such a rare item for immediate cash without proper verification, is equally to blame. In any case, it doesn't seem like a legitimate transaction. As anyone who has a good judge can tell a knockoff from the real deal in a heartbeat. Even though it was my mom's treasured item, there's no way it's worth $170,000. Given that the certificate of authenticity is clearly a joke, the excuse of not knowing it's a fake might not fly. Kevin was desperately trying to reason with the broker, but it looked like his only options were to refund the money or face the police. Just after buying a new car, Kevin ended up having to part with it. He hung up looking utterly defeated. Approaching him, Mary and her husband were smirking as if to say, "I told you so." As for me, as long as my mother's precious violin returns, I'm good. About that violin though, doing wrong is still wrong. Poor misfortune awaited Kevin.
I have some good news. I found the real violin. It was in the attic all along.
By the way, Kevin, if you're planning to sell your car, where is it? Didn't you drive here? At Bob's words, I too peeked out the window at the front door. To see and titch be quick. I concede. Kevin should have arrived by car, but Kevin's car wasn't where it was supposed to be parked in front of the entrance. That can't be. I locked it. Kevin realized something and rushed outside barefooted. Was only to find his car had rolled down the street and crashed into the fence of a large house down the hill. Geez, did he forget to set the handbrake or something? I sighed, watching Kevin race towards his wrecked car. Unfortunately, the car hit from the hood, and the front of the car was smashed in. It might be tough to sell. It seems it's going to cost a fortune to get it fixed. But how's the car hit? Isn't that the old mob boss's place? That's unfortunate. The boss place has been there for years. It's a tough break for Kevin. I silently muttered sorry for his loss to myself again. Not long after Kevin headed to the scene of his wrecked car, we went over to Mr. Mob Boss's place to apologize. After all, we were family, so we sincerely apologized for what Kevin did. Interestingly enough, the boss has been a neighbor for a long time and seemed to be good friends with my mother. He even attended my mother's funeral. The gentlemanly boss, in turn, expressed his condolences for our mother's passing and seemed to notice that my husband, son-in-law, was not at the funeral. This time, he stated that because it was solely Kevin's recklessness, he was the only one to be held responsible. As we were leaving, I glanced at the wall the car hit. It was heartbreaking to see the fine brick wall damaged. The moment we all got back to Mom's house, Kevin started talking about the inheritance again. "Hey, Catherine, when am I gonna get my share of the inheritance?" he said. "Ashman, if it wasn't for Mom's inheritance, it would have been over." Kevin seemed oddly relieved. Seeing his misunderstanding, I felt the need to set him straight. "What are you talking about? You're not inheriting a single cent." Kevin's face was a clear picture of confusion. I clicked Seville's. I informed him that, being just a son-in-law and not having been legally adopted, he had no right to an inheritance. "Why not? I was really looking forward to getting that inheritance. He's truly an insensitive and tactless man." "Well, Catherine will inherit, so there's something in it for me." I felt tears coming by seeing Kevin, who seemed to only think about money. I pulled out a few photographs from my bag and laid them on the table. Seeing them, Kevin went pale again. Looking back, I really regret ever marrying you. I said to him, Attraction, I didn't mind your clingy side, but marriage is a serious commitment with legal implications, way more than you think. Then the doorbell rang. It was the police. That's me who made a call? I said. Didn't someone steal Mom's violin? So while you all were talking earlier, I contacted the police. Under Mary's guidance, the police tried to detain Kevin. Kevin, crying, resisted. Hey, why? You should overlook theft among family members, shouldn't you? His loud admission of the theft was so naive. It almost made him seem adorable from an outsider's perspective. Although he called it family, it wasn't the case he lived with. Even if I inherited it as an inheritance, it's still considered personal property, so it can't escape being theft. I watched Kevin's back as he was put into the police car and whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." I'm sorry for causing so much worry this time. If you have something to say, feel free to visit me in my dreams, I said, thinking of my mother and praying in my heart. In the end, various charges were imposed on Kevin, and it seems he's facing fines and compensations. He has admitted to the theft of the violin. He's being sued for fraud over that violin, but since Kevin didn't know it was a replica, the outcome is uncertain. But additionally, there are costs for repairing the fence at the gang leader's house and miscellaneous payouts for me. Much silly, apparently. Some of the women Kevin was unfaithful with lent him a lot of money. But when it was discovered that he was married, he was asked to return the money he had borrowed along with the breakup. Kevin has fallen into a whirlwind of debt, and right now we're undergoing divorce mediation through our lawyers. Kevin brought up property division, but since I've been on leave since our marriage, we haven't really built any joint assets. We're above the fireplace in the living room. Photos of my mom and dad were placed side by side. I stared at them thinking, I hope you two have met again on the other side. Next to the photos, my father's heirloom violin was displayed. We really wanted the violin returned, so we explained the situation to the buyer and got it back. As the $170,000 were funds we squeezed out of my mother's inheritance. That more than anything, getting the violin back was the top priority. Again plans to pay back the $170,000 in full. Catherine, I said, make sure you don't fall for another moocher next time. Mary looked a little lonely since Bob had gone back abroad. Since I'm now single, I'm thinking of staying at my mother's house for a while. Again, it seems the women Kevin cheated with were ones he had previously mooched off of. The detective I hired to investigate Kevin told me, Kevin has gotten a little money from a lawyer and wanted to show these women his manly side, which is none of my business any longer. It seems he joined my company without any real intention of working, likely looking for another easy mark. And I turned out to be his target. And Mary pointed it out to me, and I deeply reflected on my past actions. Actually, I learned from a private investigator that Kevin had been estranged from his parents a long time ago. Mentally, they were utterly disappointed with Kevin for not working and relying on women to support him. I can relate to their feelings more than ever now. The fact that Kevin, as an adult, couldn't live without leeching off women makes me pity him. Maybe when he was younger, there were women willing to support him. However, living like that for the rest of his life seems nearly impossible. I hope this incident makes Kevin reflect on his actions and realize the value of working and earning money. I've returned to work after my leave. The company my mother left behind is going to be taken over by Bob, and he'll be returning from abroad soon. That's why Mary has been cheerful recently, and I've been enjoying the hearty breakfasts made by her. But when I was getting ready to head to work and about to put on my shoes, I took off my half-laced shoes and went to the living room to say my morning prayer. Then I talked to my parents as usual. Off I go, Mom and Dad. I hope today is going to be a good day.